what struck me last night, so watching Keir Starmer in number 10 in that pre-recorded clip, he was every inch the lawyer. It's very technical. He's going through the language and he is drawing on his history as a lawyer to say, look, this is specifically about a limited defensive purpose. I guess the challenge is that for many people out there, they won't see that delineation and they won't see that difference.
An awful lot has happened thus far this morning. We're keeping an eye across the news around the Middle East. There's been a drone strike on an oil refinery in Saudi Arabia. An American plane, maybe several American planes, have come out of the air in Kuwait. It looks like there's been no casualties there, but these massive fighter jets just on fire. One of them, we saw a video of that. There's been explosions reported in Doha, Bahrain and Dubai. The Middle East and conflict has been escalating up. And the one place to do it, we're always live here on Times Radio, so as things are happening, you'll hear it first of all. One of the things that we do when we become listeners after this show is if something happens and you become aware of it, you think, I just turned Times Radio on. The test I really always want us to pass is that when something massive happens in the world, you turn Times Radio on, you'll get someone telling you something you didn't know about it. And we'll try and live up to that over the course of the next couple of days.
Well, earlier this morning, we heard from the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, who criticised the government. He argued that Sir Keir Starmer should have seen from the start that the UK would need to allow America to use British bases for its attacks on Iran. We asked Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, if fear of repeating the mistakes of the Iraq War in 2003 was behind the government's reticence.
See, that's one of a whole range of calculations. Is we know that there's been history in the past of regional escalation. We have continually said we wanted de-escalation, and we also want ultimately to seek negotiated agreements that can prevent any future use of nuclear weapons and development of nuclear weapons by Iran. We've seen, look, there's a regime that has brutally killed its own people, tens of thousands of protesters brutally attacked by the Iranian regime. We also know the threat that it poses to its neighbours, and also even threats it has backed on UK streets. So this is a very malign regime. But we do also think that we want a regional stability, and we want to keep pursuing ultimately the negotiated agreements. But we also have to be able to support the kind of defensive action that our Gulf partners are asking for.
Can you understand the American response? Senator Lindsey Graham says he's disappointed in the UK. Quote, "It's sad to see Western democracies lose their passion for justice and a sense of right and wrong the further away from their shores the event occurs."
Well, our British citizens are being directly affected by this. We currently have citizens who are holidaymakers who are unable to get home. We have people who have been on business trips or visits to Dubai, for example, who currently cannot get home because
I want to come on to talk about
closure of airspace.
I want to come on to talk about them. Can I just ask very specifically on that point?
Just specifically on that point, I think our guiding issue has been about UK interests and about what we think is the right way forward. And our assessment was that it was not in the UK's interests to provide support for the action that took place over the weekend, but it is in UK interests, and it is the right thing to do, given how many British citizens that we have in the region, to support this defensive action now.
Well, that was Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, earlier on the programme. Let's speak to the Times political editor, Steven Swinford. Good morning.
Good morning.
I mean, you heard Yvette Cooper in her own words there explaining some of what's going on behind the scenes in the government, but others who look from the outside suggest it should suggest a lack of strategy from the Prime Minister. What do you think's going on?
I think it looks like a U-turn. It looks every inch the U-turn. But what Number 10 are saying, they are adamant it isn't one. They are saying that the original ask was to use British US bases for offensive airstrikes, so kind of taking out Iranian leaders, that kind of stuff. And this is not that. This is kind of targeting missile silos, etc. But what struck me last night, so watching Keir Starmer in Number 10 in that pre-recorded clip, he was every inch the lawyer. It's very technical. He's going through the language and he is drawing on his history as a lawyer to say, look, this is specifically about a limited defensive purpose. I guess the challenge is that for many people out there, they won't see that delineation and they won't see that difference. This wasn't a kind of stirring wartime speech of us joining action. This was careful, limited, and that is because they are worried, exactly as you said, Kate, about that clip. They are worried about the spectre of the Iraq War and obviously how their voters felt about that and continue to feel about that to this day. So they are emphasising that this is a very limited thing that they are doing.
How concerned should we be, Steve, about our relationship with the Americans at this point? I mean, I presume Donald Trump and Sir Keir Starmer haven't yet spoken.
They did speak at the weekend briefly, and I presume part of that was this ask to use the joint bases. And look, ultimately, there has clearly been a significant deterioration in relations between Trump and Starmer. We saw that extraordinary put down from Trump, a series of them over the Chagos Islands, and the role of Diego Garcia, this joint military base. So things are not where they were, but Starmer is still trying to tread this careful line. The thing that stood out yesterday, again and again, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, was asked 6 times if Britain supported the actions of the US and Israel in the offensive actions, the original ones. He was unable to say that Britain does, and that is one of the challenges here, that we are kind of with them in a defensive capacity. We don't want British civilians being targeted. We don't want drone attacks against Cyprus, but we are certainly not supporting the original action. And the reason for that is because we determined it to be illegal privately, but they don't want to say that publicly.
And that's an embarrassing situation for the Defence Secretary John Healey to be in. Clearly, you could see from his face and hear from his voice in the interviews that he did yesterday. Steve, are we expecting to hear anything from the Defence Secretary or the Prime Minister today in Parliament?
I'm sure there will be a statement later on. We're expecting something from Starmer just on the kind of change in the legal position and where we are now. The other big story that is worth keeping an eye on is this mass evacuation. And I cannot understate to listeners how big what's being drawn up is here. So there are 200,000 plus 300,000 in total in the Gulf countries, and hundreds of thousands of those people are currently stranded. They can't get out because the airspace is closed. So in the best traditions of Whitehall, they are doing a massive contingency planning exercise, which I'm told involves huge fleets of buses taking people on the 10-hour journey to Saudi Arabia so that they could be flown out from there. And the problem they've got is that the longer this goes on, and Trump is talking about 4 weeks, the more difficult it is going to be for people that are stuck there, that are in the line of fire, they want to get home and they can't get home. So that, it feels to me, is on the kind of outside track, this huge story that is looming about what would be one of the biggest evacuations in history if it was to go ahead. Obviously, we're not talking Dunkirk terms, but we are talking tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people being evacuated from Gulf countries, and that is a big deal.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story, and we heard from Yvette Cooper on that earlier, calling on people to shelter in place for the time being, but we will follow that up throughout the rest of the day, Steve, as I know that you will too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is the Times political editor, Steven Swinford.
What percentage of influencers who live in Dubai, I wonder, will be getting on a bus for 10 hours and going to Saudi Arabia?
Although I have to say, we had a couple of messages from people who said, my son or my daughter couldn't find any work in this country. They went out to Dubai, got a job, earned decent pay. They'll probably come back in a couple of years, but better than just sitting here twiddling their thumbs. Yeah. So there are people who go out there because they know it's a good environment to find work, enterprising people who want to get on. Fair play to them.
It's a very fair point, because I have a very jaundiced view on it, but you're right, these things are never as straightforward as all of that.